So let's go on with our friend's comments here. He says, I also believe Exodus 12 clearly identifies those that are Israel to be in different levels. For example, looking at the Hebrew word ger, using whichever Hebrew dictionary concordance you like, you will see it defined as a convert or a proselyte. That's absolutely not true. I looked at 2 dictionaries, and both of them did not define it that way. It defined it as a sojourner or someone who journeys. And I know that he's probably looking at Halot. Halot is a great resource. It is. There's no doubt about it. I use Halot a lot. But Halot is not always right. It's made by German scholars, and they heavily rested on the rabbinical beliefs. For instance, Halot also says that the word Messiah never refers to the Messiah figure in the Tanakh. That's simply not true. And to be honest, when you look at the word ger, you don't have and why don't you enlighten us on this, Rob? The word ger and the idea of conversion. Talk to us about the Maccabees, conversion, when it started to be used as proselyte or conversion.
First of all, we need to wean our diet. We need to wean ourselves off of anachronistic terminology.
Okay.
They're like additives and preservatives and food coloring.
Go for it.
And hydrogenated vegetable oil and high fructose corn syrup. Okay. That we gotta let's use terminology of the scriptures. Paul says Abraham believed, was credited to him as righteousness, and that's the pattern for us. That's the obedient. That's the core of the obedient life, is faith. You can't please God without it. We need to start with the scriptures and build on the rock of the word, not try to bring in different roof structures and see if we can build supports in the scriptures to hold it up. And then we can limit ourselves to the Tanakh. Then we can expand, look at the apostolic writings. Then we can say, okay, now let's look at Jewish writings in the Second Temple period and try to gauge how were different Jewish groups understanding this or that perspective. But when we take this idea of, quote, conversion, in this idea of you convert from one religion to another or from non-religion to a religion, we're using terms that are not in the Bible. So now we've actually changed the domain of the conversation to something that's may or may not be anchored in the scriptures, built on the word itself. So that's an important thing, because Yeshua says we want to build on the rock of the word, because no matter how pretty the picture might be, if it's not built on the rock, what's going to happen? Storms are going to come, it's going to wipe it away, and we're going to be left staring at each other going, what just happened? So if we look, and there's a lot that needs to be said here, but one of the words that comes to mind is proselyte, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the words that Halot uses. As I think it's the first thing, proselyte or convert is how Halot translates the word ger.
Okay. So let's just say, okay, forget the lexicons. Let's just go look at the actual texts that use the word and look at the contexts for proselyte. Forget that it means a convert later. It means a non-Jew who converts to rabbinic religion or whatever. It's a Greek word. Okay? Right? It's a Greek word. And it is used a few times, often to translate ger, which ger itself, and I encourage people to read Fellow Heirs by Tim Hegg, because he gets into there, he contrasts the seemingly difficult passage between Leviticus and Deuteronomy, where it says one time you can give the treifa or the nevilah, the meat, the animal that died of itself, you can give to the ger. And then in the other book it says... Actually, I don't think... Wait,
hang on, Rob. Are you sure about that? I thought that...
Yeah, it's in the beginning. He talks about Leviticus and Deuteronomy.
No, but I thought that word was Ezrach.
No, it's ger.
Okay, keep going.
Anyway, so the word ger is... It has a malleable meaning depending on context. Anyway, this word proselyte is the same way. In Greek, proselytos it's called. And it's clearly, we can look at the Septuagint, which is, 3rd century BC, a Jewish Greek translation. So it's a translation by Jews probably priests, who spoke both read Hebrew, they understood Hebrew and Greek. They translated the Torah into Greek. And how did they use it? Well, that's our earliest data. Well, how did they use it? Well, they used it to translate ger, but they also used it like in Exodus 22. You shall not harm a proselytos, nor shall you oppress him, for you were proselutoi in the land of Egypt.
Okay, wait, hang on just a second. I want to make sure that I understand what you're doing here, because you're not reading, no longer are you reading out of a Hebrew text. You're reading out of the Septuagint, right?
Right.
Okay, so the Septuagint, let's just in case we have listeners who would be unaware, the Septuagint is a 3rd century BCE.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. So
text.
it's a Jewish Greek translation.
Okay.
A translation made by Jews who were in authority.
So now, but why have you moved from Hebrew to Greek?
Because it's with the word proselyte that we start thinking in terms of conversion.
Okay, so your point, I want to make sure, I want to just walk through this slowly. So I want to make sure I get your point. What you're saying is that the word ger in the Hebrew text never denotes someone who has converted. We would never assume that from the Hebrew text if all we had was the Tanakh. Is that correct?
Right. That's right.
Okay, and so we'd only get the idea of a convert, someone who converted from non-Jewish to Jewish through this Greek word, and that Greek word is proselytos. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, keep going.
Well, it's the same with ger. If we look at Exodus 22, I think it's verse 20 in the Hebrew, but I think it's or maybe it might be Exodus, 22:20, I think. It said, "You shall not oppress the ger. You shall not wrong the ger, because you were gerim in the land of Egypt." Okay? So, in other words, here, Israel, this is post receiving the 10 Commandments, is told the ger, you will not wrong him or oppress him, because you were ger. You yourself were a ger in the land of Egypt. And if we look at the Septuagint, it says the same thing, except it uses the word proselyte for ger.
Actually, I love that.
You shall not oppress the proselyte, because you were proselytes in Egypt.
Yeah, and actually...
Okay, well, if we understand a proselyte to be a convert, that wouldn't make any sense. Why would the Torah tell Israelites that they were converts?
Yeah, on FFOZ's website, Toby Janicki has written a piece. In that piece, he translates ger as non-Israelite. How would that work in this context?
So he wants it to be non-Israelite.
Yeah,
but then other times he wants it to be a convert, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't read his stuff, so I can't speak for him. But we have that happens in Exodus. It happens in Leviticus, it happens in Deuteronomy, where we have the word ger / proselyte in the Greek. Clearly, where it does not mean anything about any kind of conversion. Otherwise, you would have to somehow have a picture where Israel were converts. What it means is that they were a marginal group. They didn't have power. They didn't have resources. They were dependent upon the larger society. And that's why the Gerim are often listed together in the Torah with widows and orphans and Levites, because it's the same thing. The Levites, the widows, and the orphans they're economically on the outskirts with respect to any kind of power or voice. They are the most vulnerable in all of society. And that's the heart of the Torah. It says you will remember, because you know the nefesh of the ger, it says. You know the heart of that person, because you experienced that oppression in Egypt. Now, don't do that to other people. Don't do to other people, the Torah says, what you experienced from Pharaoh's unjust rule.
So Andre says, so we are reading the modern meaning of proselyte into the Septuagint. So talk to me about when this idea of conversion started.
Good point. So the proselyte it doesn't occur in any of the what we call the intertestamental books, which I think is a problematic title, but it's not used in the Maccabees books, for example. Josephus never uses the word proselyte. Josephus, who wrote extensively about all the history of the Second Temple period, up to and beyond its destruction.
But are you
talking about all sorts of things between nations and people? He doesn't use the word proselyte, and he's writing in Greek.
So then
Philo uses it a few times. He writes probably early first century. He's writing in Greek. He's in Egypt. He uses it. He quotes the Leviticus passage where the Lord tells Israel, says, "The land is mine, and you are proselytes. You are my proselytes in the land." It says, "You are gerim with me in the land." In other words, the land. Philo emphasizes that God owns everything, and so Israel in God's land are like sojourners. In other words, they don't own the land. So that the term had different usages depending on context. It does not mean convert. Now, Philo does have one place where he uses the Greek explanation of the word, because it comes from this verb proserchomai, for those who have done Greek before. And he does a little midrash. He says that, therefore, they are called proselytes because they have proselythenai. They have come over to be God, to fear the true God. In other words, they've abandoned false traditions. So Philo gives us one place where he does, but he's playing on the word because it means they've crossed over or something like that.
So, okay, wait, let me ask this question then. At what point do you think that the word proselytos began to mean something in terms of a ritual conversion?
I think it was probably specific to probably first century Common Era. It arose after Jewish sectarianism started to flourish. So it's post-Maccabean, because before the Maccabees, we don't really have different sects of Judaism. It's really, or what we call Judaism. But after the Maccabees, what we have after, I don't remember which king it was, but they do rapid expansion of territory. They claim Idumea and some other places where they go and circumcise all the males by force, and they say, you are now Jews.
No, wasn't that in the Maccabean period, though?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
That's in Maccabean period. So that's in the late 2nd century, coming into the 1st century BC. And then that's where we have the Book of Jubilees and part of the Book of Enoch, where you have people pushing back. The Book of Jubilees says, no, you have to be circumcised on the 8th day or you're not Israel at all. In other words, for Jubilees, a non-circumcised 8th day Israelite can never become an Israelite. There's no such thing from the Book of Jubilees perspective of an adult male coming from the nations and taking on circumcision. That would be a false person. And Jubilees is doing that because they're pushing back against they don't agree with the Maccabees expansionist claim that we're just going to go to a new expand our territory, circumcise all the male, and say now you're all Judeans or you're now Jews. They say no, that you can't do that. And so you have we've talked about this before. I think you have it becomes a mess. The meaning of circumcision in that time becomes a mess. You have different groups arguing for different things of what it means. And to the Maccabean kings, to the Hasmoneans, it's a mark of that they are now part of Jewish land under Jewish kingship, and they will therefore pay taxes, etc. And so, but then we go, well, let's look at the apostolic writings. The only index we have, to my knowledge, and I've scoured a lot of texts for this, is Matthew 23:15, where Yeshua says, "You scribes and Pharisees," in 23:15, "you cross land and sea to make one proselyte. And when you get one, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves." So in Matthew 23:15, it's the only data we have, to my knowledge, where it suggests that this idea of, quote, making a proselyte. And clearly, it's not a good thing. The making of a proselyte is not a good thing. Right? He says you're going to make him, and then you make him twice as much a child of Gehenna as yourself. Why would we, and that's Yeshua, why would we say, oh yeah, conversion is good? Conversion is a valid option when it says no. The only other times we have it are in Acts. Acts 2, Acts 6, and Acts 13. You can use Blue Letter Bible, just look up proselyte. And every time it's the label of what people were before they were believers. That's one point. Another point is that as proselytes are never considered Jews. They're listed with Jews. But Luke, it seems that from Luke's perspective, that we learn from Acts, the proselytes are not Jews. They're a different class. So that it's not like you had people that converted to Judaism. This is the problem, because in one of the translations, I think this might be the Net Bible, it translates proselyte in Acts 6:5 as Nicholas, a Gentile convert to Judaism.
Ooh.
But all it just says he's a proselyte.
I'm gonna have to talk to Wallace about that at the next ETS and SBL meeting.